In my last video we saw that many Jews were dispersed all over the Roman Empire, but they were not really Jews, but Edomites. But these Jews and their religion could have died off easily if it wasn't for another group that came on the scene in the medieval times, approximately 740 AD. An entire empire was forcibly converted to Judaism by the decree of its emperor. This was the Kazarian Empire, centered in modern-day Ukraine, comprised of a people of mixed Turkish descent. The Kazarians took their new religion like ducks to water. Even after their empire fell, never to rise again, they were very zealous to keep the precepts of Judaism. These proselytes to Judaism moved gradually into Western Europe, where they settled in cities and took up commercial occupations. By the time the medieval period closed, they no longer considered themselves Kazarians, but viewed themselves as Jews. The Judaism formed the backbone of the subculture. A prize-winning Jewish author, Arthur Koestler, wrote in his best-selling book, and I quote, "Thus the Judaization of the Khazars was a gradual process, which, triggered off by political expedients, slowly penetrated into deeper strata of their minds and eventually produced the messianism of their period of decline. Their religious commitment survived the collapse of their state and persisted, as we shall see, in the Khazar, Jewish settlements of Russia and Poland." End quote. In the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1911 we read, quote, "The Jews expelled from Constantinople sought a home against the Khazars, developed the Khazar trade, and contended with Mohammedans and Christians for the theological alliance of pagan people." End quote. So we know that to the modern world, as of a century ago, most Jews in the world were found in Eastern Europe, with most of them in Poland. It is from these proselytes to Judaism that the language of Yiddish developed. Yiddish is not Hebrew, although it does have some Hebrew words there. Khazarian Jews picked them up from the writings of the Old Testament. Yiddish is a mix of Germanic, Slavic, Aramaic, Romance, and even Turkic languages. This shows us the multicultural ethnic background of the Khazar Jews as they migrated into Europe. But what is most important to remember about these Khazarian converts to Judaism is that they have no genetic link to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob or any other Hebrew. Most Jews we see today are descendants of the Khazarian branch, while the small number of Edomite Jews can actually claim Abraham as the father, because the Edomites were the son of Esau. A movement known as Zionism began in the late 19th century that still has significant impact on our world today. It was the notion that the Jews needed a homeland, a nation of their own, preferably Palestine. The movement quickly became popular despite the fact that nearly all Jews in the world had no genetic claim to Jacob, Israel, or Judah. And the small group of Jews whose ancestors did live in Palestine were only through being descendants of Esau. In 1917, the Zionist movement was able to convince the British Crown, in the midst of World War I, that he would be an asset to the British in the Middle East, should Britain win the war. The British hoped to capture Palestine as a prize from the almost defeated Ottoman Empire, who had been the rulers of that region. After the war, the British began to make space for the Jewish immigrants by relocating the Palestinian Arabs. This process took 3 decades. After World War II, Jewish militants began a violent campaign targeting British and Palestinian leaders and strongholds. They wanted their own government. They wanted complete independence. In 1948, The erstwhile terrorists became statesmen, and the modern nation of Israel came into existence. The 1948 regime, calling itself Israel, has a flimsy claim to that word. Most people assume they are Israelites, but they are clearly not. And the only ones that can make the claim they lived in Israel in times past are the descendants of Esau. None of them are descendants of Jacob, Israel. Also, none of them are of the tribe of Judah, and thus have no right to call themselves Jews, at least not in the original sense. Therefore, they have no legitimate claim to the land they occupy. Even their religious claim to be Israelites is false, for they do not follow the teachings of Abraham, only in lip service, but follow the Talmudic Babylonian teachings, and have zero connection to the life, ministry and teachings of Jesus Christ. And interestingly, many modern Jews are ironically quite secular. While they keep one foot connected to the culture adopted by the Jewish converts' forebears, many are openly atheist, or at least agnostic. So the vast majority are impostors. Twice in the book of Revelation, the followers of Christ are informed that there is a group existing of people who claim to be Jews but are not. Revelation: I know the blasphemy of them that which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, do you know any other large group who makes the claim to be Jews? Due to the naivety of Judea Christians, these Christians look up to a people who are adversary to Christ. Ironically, Christians look up to those who hate Christ, thinking they are the true Israelites. So let's take a look at the biblical description of true Israelites. In Genesis 22 we read, That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. So those folks who live in Palestine claiming to be Israel, they have always been small in numbers. Also, these impostors have not continued the nation through almost all of their history, not to mention a company of nations. Read Genesis 35:11. I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee. Thirdly, a crown, that is a royal ruling house, will always be found among true Israelites. Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and until him shall the gathering of the people be. The charlatans in Palestine do not have a royal house at all, let alone one that can prove its biblical pedigree. And also true Israel will be known by a new name. Isaiah 62:2. And the Gentiles shall see thy righteousness, and all kings thy glory, and thou shalt be called by a new name. So by these verses we see who is the wheat and who are the tares. We can see that the true Israel are the European nations. Let's look at Revelation 12, verse 1 and 2. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So the woman is ethnic Israel. The 12 crowns are the 12 tribes, and the child is, of course, Jesus Christ. Revelation 12, 5-6. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And the child was caught up unto God, and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God. So the man-child destined to rule all nations is Jesus Christ, who did ascend into heaven. And the woman, Israel, fled into the wilderness. That's a description of true Israel as they found safety in the wilderness portions of the earth. Northwest Europe, and later America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. But we see that Europe being the wilderness regions in that time. Now look at Revelation 12:17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now the dragon is Satan, and he's angry with the woman who is Israel. And Israel keep God's commandments and adhere to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, is this a description of those people who call themselves Jews? No. They despise the commandments of God and reject the Christ. Therefore, the woman, Israel, are the Caucasian people of Europe and other white nations that came out of Europe. So as long as there is no clarity on who the Jews in Israel really are, battling the Arabs in the old land, there will be no peace. So we look forward to the day when Christ will return, separating the wheat from the tares, remove imitators, and restore the inheritance of the Holy Land to its rightful heirs. This is our hope. This is what we're waiting for, right? The day that Christ will gather his saints and put them back in the promised land. And again, I'm not saying that only Israelites can be saved, right? The plan of God is for Israel to be a light to the world, and that the whole world eventually will be saved. And the most beautiful thing is that Christ's mission was indeed to find the lost sheep of Israel, which he did. But we see in the story of the Canaan woman, who was not an Israelite, that also Jesus, because of her faith, helped her and blessed her, right? Because through Israel, all families of the earth will be blessed.